The morning Tessa Harlow's world collapsed. The sky over Detroit was the color of old concrete, flat and indifferent, like it had seen too much and stopped caring. She was standing outside the unemployment office on Michigan Avenue, with her jacket zipped to her chin and her mother's medical bills folded into a square in her back pocket. The paper was soft from being handled so many times, corners gone fuzzy, the numbers still sharp. $47,000. That was what a stroke cost when you had no insurance and a daughter who had just been laid off from the hotel where she'd worked the front desk for 6 years. Tessa had done the math so many times it lived in her body now, a low hum behind her sternum that never quite went away. She got the check-in number, sat in the plastic chair that wobbled on one leg, and stared at the flyers on the wall about job retraining programs and community resources. The woman beside her was knitting something yellow. The man across the room was asleep. The fluorescent light above Tessa's head buzzed in a way that made her back teeth ache. Her phone showed 2 missed calls from Mercy General, and one from a number she didn't recognize. She ignored all of them. What she didn't know, sitting there in that chair with her borrowed jacket and her folded bills, was that the missed call from the unknown number would change everything. She didn't know that in 48 hours she would be standing in the lobby of one of the most expensive buildings in Detroit, talking to a man who had never once in his life been told no. She didn't know any of it. She was just a 29-year-old woman trying to survive the particular cruelty of a Thursday in November, and that was already more than enough. The call back came that afternoon. A woman with a clipped, professional voice told Tessa she had been selected for a temporary placement, a household management position. The pay was 3 times what she'd made at the hotel. The assignment would last 60 days, possibly longer, depending on the employer's satisfaction. What kind of household? Tessa asked. A private residence, the woman said. The employer is a businessman. He requires someone organized, discreet, and reliable. Your references from the Bellwood Hotel were excellent. The employer's name? A brief pause. Mr. Franklin Caruso. Tessa didn't recognize it immediately. She wrote it down on the back of an envelope and looked it up that night on her phone, sitting on the floor of her mother's hospital room, while Ruth Harlow slept in the adjustable bed, her breathing the slow rhythm of someone fighting a battle that had mostly been won but not entirely. Franklin Caruso, 51 years old, CEO of Caruso Capital Holdings, which owned stakes in real estate, logistics, and half a dozen other things Tessa didn't fully understand. His picture showed a man in a dark suit with gray at his temples and an expression that looked like it had never once been surprised by anything. The articles about him were respectful but careful, the kind of careful that meant people knew things they weren't saying. There were mentions of charitable foundations, a waterfront property in Grosse Pointe, a reputation for demanding precision from everyone in his orbit. One profile in a business magazine said he had fired 3 household managers in 2 years. Tessa stared at her mother's sleeping face for a long moment, at the IV in her arm, at the whiteboard on the wall that said goal for today. Walk to the window and back. She called the placement agency the next morning and said yes. The house was not what she expected. She had pictured something cold and showroom perfect, all marble and right angles. What she found instead was a place that had clearly once been a home. There were photographs on the walls of the hallway, a woman with dark hair and a child's laugh frozen in a summer somewhere, a dog that appeared in half the pictures and then disappeared, books on every flat surface, a kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee even when no one had made any. The housekeeper who let her in was a woman named Dolores, 60-something, with the posture of someone who had been managing difficult situations since before Tessa was born. Mr. Caruso will see you at 7, Dolores said. He keeps early hours. Dinner is at 6:30, which you will not be joining. Your role begins with managing his schedule, his correspondence, and anything that does not require his direct attention. He will tell you the rest himself, Elf. Is he? Tessa hesitated. Is he difficult? Dolores looked at her with an expression that was not unkind. He is precise, she said. There is a difference. If you do what you say you will do, when you say you will do it, you will have no problems. Mr. Caruso was already at the dining table when Tessa was shown in at 7. He was reading something on a tablet, a glass of water untouched beside his plate. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment he simply studied her the way someone reads a contract, systematically, looking for the clauses that will cause problems later. Miss Harlow, he said. Mr. Caruso, sit. She sat. He set down the tablet. The agency tells me you managed guest services for 6 years at the Bellwood, that you handled scheduling, vendor relationships, staff coordination, and guest complaints. Yes, why did they let you go? Budget cuts. The hotel was sold. Half the staff was eliminated. He nodded, not sympathetically, but not dismissively either, just absorbing information. I had a household manager before you, and before her, 2 others. Do you want to know why they left? Yes, the first couldn't handle the pace. The second took shortcuts she didn't tell me about, and I found out. The third, he paused, something shifting briefly in his expression, had a family emergency and needed to return home. That one was not her fault. He picked up his water glass. I am telling you this so you understand what I expect. I don't need someone who is impressive in an interview. I need someone who does the job, tells the truth when something goes wrong, and doesn't disappear. Tessa thought about her mother's medical bills, folded and soft in her pocket. I can do that, she said. Good. He stood, which apparently meant the interview was over. Dolores will show you your workspace. You start Monday. He left the room without looking back, and Tessa sat for a moment in the chair, breathing. The house ticked quietly around her. She started Monday. The first 2 weeks were the hardest. Mr. Caruso communicated primarily through a shared calendar and brief, specific emails. He did not explain the context behind his requests. He simply made them and expected them to be executed correctly. When something wasn't right, he said so plainly, without cruelty but without softening. When something was done well, he said nothing, which Dolores told her was its own form of approval. If he's not complaining, you're doing well, Dolores said one evening, handing Tessa a cup of tea she hadn't asked for. Comforting, Tessa said. Dolores almost smiled. She learned the shape of his days. He woke at 5:30 and worked for 2 hours before anyone else was in the building. He ate at the same times every day, took calls from New York between 9 and 10, and had a standing reservation at a restaurant downtown every Friday that he sometimes kept and sometimes didn't, depending on things Tessa couldn't always predict. He had a brother in Chicago he called on Sundays, a conversation that always lasted exactly 11 minutes and left him quieter than usual for the rest of the day. She did not ask about the photographs in the hallway. She did not ask about the dog. She did her job. On a Wednesday in her 3rd week, she made a mistake. It was a scheduling conflict she hadn't caught. A dinner meeting double-booked with a call that had been on his calendar for 3 weeks. She discovered it at 4 in the afternoon, 2 hours before it would have become a problem. She fixed it, rescheduled the dinner, sent the updated invitations, and then sent Mr. Caruso an email explaining what had happened and what she had done. He appeared in the doorway of her office, a small room off the main study, with a window that looked onto the back garden. At 4:45, you told me before I asked, he said. Tessa looked up from her screen. Yes, most people would have hoped I wouldn't notice. Most people aren't me. He stood there for a moment, looking at her with that same assessing expression from the first night. Then he said, the rescheduled dinner works better anyway. The original time conflicted with traffic from the stadium. He turned to go, then stopped. Good catch, Miss Harlow. He was gone before she could respond. She sat very still for a moment, then turned back to her screen. That night, driving back to the apartment she shared with her younger brother Cody while her mother was in the rehab facility, Tessa felt something she hadn't felt in months. Something that took her a few minutes to identify. Because it had been absent long enough that she'd stopped expecting it. It felt like being useful, like mattering in a room where it counted. Cody was 17 and furious in the way that 17-year-olds are furious when the world has disappointed them, without explanation. Their father had left when Tessa was 12 and Cody was 3, which meant Cody didn't remember him, but felt his absence like a missing tooth, always probing the empty space. He was smart and stubborn and eating cereal at the kitchen table when she got home, a textbook open in front of him. How's the scary rich man, he said. Not scary, Tessa said, dropping her bag. Just precise. That's what scary people want you to think. She made them dinner. Pasta, because it was fast and cheap, and Cody ate enormous quantities of it without complaint, and listened while he told her about a test he'd done well on, and a girl he was pretending he wasn't interested in. The normalcy of it, the small ordinary warmth, held her together in a way she couldn't have explained. She called Mercy General after Cody went to sleep. Her mother was doing better, walking with a cane now. The social worker said there was a possibility of discharge in 3 weeks, which meant Tessa needed to figure out home care, equipment, and a dozen other things that all cost money she was only just beginning to have. She wrote it all in the small notebook she kept by the bed, the one where she tracked everything that needed to be solved. Then she turned off the light and lay in the dark and tried to sleep. 4 weeks in, she found out about the gala. It appeared on the calendar with 2 weeks' notice, an annual fundraiser for the Children's Hospital Foundation, black tie, at the Marquette Hotel downtown. Caruso was listed as a presenting sponsor, which meant a table for 12, a presentation during the program, and approximately 37 things that needed coordinating. Tessa worked backward from the event date and made a list. Florist seating arrangements, catering contact at the hotel, RSVPs from his guests, the text of the presentation, transportation. She handled each item methodically, updating the shared calendar, sending confirmation emails, cross-referencing. On the Tuesday before the gala, Mr. Caruso called her into the study. He was standing at the window looking out at the garden, which was bare and brown with late November. He didn't turn around when she came in. "The RSVPs," he said. "One of my guests is a city councilwoman who has a dietary restriction I didn't mention to you. Shellfish allergy. Severe." Tessa had already called the hotel that morning for a different reason and had the catering manager's direct line. "I can have it added to the table order by end of day." Now he turned. "You're not surprised that you forgot to tell me something?" "No, you tell me what you remember. I try to catch the rest." He studied her for a moment with an expression she was beginning to recognize. Not quite a smile, but the territory adjacent to one. "My wife used to say the same thing," he said, and then something in his face changed, and he turned back to the window. "Call the hotel. Add the allergy to the reservation. Already planned to. Mr. Caruso, the photographs in the hallway, the woman and the child." He was quiet for a moment. "My wife and my daughter. Lorraine died 4 years ago. Breast cancer." A pause. "My daughter lives in Boston." "I'm sorry," Tessa said. "About your wife?" "So am I," he said. And that was all. She called the hotel and handled the allergy. She did not bring it up again. But she understood the house differently after that. The careful order of it. The way things were maintained without being changed. The photographs that stayed where they were not because he had forgotten to take them down, but because he hadn't wanted to. The gala itself was a success by any measure. Tessa spent most of it near the back of the room, with a clipboard and a radio frequency to the hotel's event coordinator, handling the small disasters that attend every large event. The centerpieces that arrived 30 minutes late, the microphone that fed back during the welcome remarks, the guest who arrived without his name on the list because someone at the hotel had misspelled it. She fixed everything before it became visible. Mr. Caruso gave his presentation, calm and prepared, and the room applauded afterward. He found her near the exit, still holding her clipboard. "Nothing went wrong tonight," he said. "A few things went wrong," Tessa said. "They just didn't go wrong publicly." He looked at her. "How many?" "3 minor. I'll send you a debrief tomorrow." He was quiet for a moment. The ballroom was loud around them, music and conversation and the clink of glasses. "Miss Harlow," he said, "your 60-day contract ends in 2 weeks. I know. I'd like to discuss extending it." Tessa thought about her mother's discharge, the home care equipment, Cody's college applications due in January, which she had been helping him with in the evenings, the notebook by her bed, the list that kept getting shorter slowly, month by month. "I'd be open to that conversation," she said. He nodded once, turned, and went back to his guests. She took a car home that night and sat in the back seat watching Detroit slide past the windows. The city she had grown up in, that she had never left even when leaving, might have been easier. The city where her mother had worked 30 years in a school cafeteria and raised 2 kids on a salary that required miracles of budgeting. The city that had given her nothing easily and everything she had. She was almost home when her phone rang. "Cody." "Hey," she said, "you should be asleep. There was a guy here." His voice was careful in a way that made her stomach tighten. "He left when I told him you weren't home." "But Tess," it was Dale. The tightening became a drop. Dale Merritt, her ex-boyfriend of 3 years, whom she had left 18 months ago after she understood, slowly and then all at once, that the version of herself she was becoming with him was not a version she wanted to be. He had not accepted the ending with grace. There had been calls, then messages, then a period of silence she had believed was over. Apparently not. "He didn't come inside?" she asked. "No, I didn't let him." A pause. "He knew your schedule. He said he knew where you worked." Tessa pressed her hand flat against her thigh to keep it still. "I'll be home in 10 minutes, she said. "Lock the door." She told herself it was manageable. She had handled worse. She was good at handling things. She sat with Cody until he was calm and pretended to be calm herself, and then lay awake until 3 in the morning running scenarios and dismissing them. She could change her route to work. She could tell the placement agency. She could file a report. She could do all of this and still feel the cold slickness of real fear, which was different from worry, which was different from stress. She knew the difference because she'd felt it before, that particular animal alertness that said, "This person has decided something about you that you don't get to vote on." She went to work the next morning and did her job and said nothing. She said nothing for 3 days. On the 4th day, Dale was standing outside the building when she arrived. He wasn't threatening. That was the particular intelligence of men like him. They understood the exact distance from threatening to plausibly deniable. He was just standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets, and he said her name, and the sound of it in his mouth, with that particular ownership, made every hair on her arms stand up. She walked past him and into the building and went directly to her office and sat down and was perfectly still for 60 seconds. Then she stood up and went to find Mr. Caruso. He was in the study on a call when she knocked, but he looked up and whatever he saw in her face made him hold up one finger to whoever he was speaking to. "I'll call you back," he said, and ended the call. What happened? It was not a question. It was the voice of someone who had processed enough situations to know when a situation had arrived. Tessa told him, clearly, without editorializing, the way she handled everything. 18 months ago, the relationship, the ending, the months of contact that she had managed to make stop, and now, the visit to her apartment, the appearance this morning. Mr. Caruso listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Have you filed a report?" "Not yet." "He hasn't technically." "File a report," he said, "today, regardless of technical thresholds." He stood up. "And I want his name, Mr. Caruso, his name, Miss Harlow. And whatever else you know about him," she told him. Dale Merritt, 34, worked in auto parts distribution, had an apartment in Dearborn. She watched Mr. Caruso write it down with the same methodical attention he brought to everything. "This building has security," he said. "I'll have his photograph flagged at the entrance. I'll also have someone look into whether his behavior in the past constituted anything actionable." He looked at her. "I am not doing this without your knowledge or consent. You tell me how far you want this to go, and I'll stop where you say." Tessa was quiet for a moment. "Why?" Mr. Caruso set down his pen. Something moved across his face. Not quite the grief she'd seen at the window, but adjacent to it, the same territory. "My wife," he said, "had a situation before we met, years before. Someone who decided time to feel safe." He paused. "I am a man with resources. I try to use them in ways Lorraine would have approved of." Tessa felt something shift in her chest. Not the wall coming down. She was not a woman who let walls down in a single conversation, but a crack in it, a seam of light. "Go as far as the law allows," she said. "No further. I don't want anything done that I'd have to explain to a judge." Mr. Caruso nodded. The almost smile appeared. That was exactly the right answer. Within a week, Dale Merritt received a registered letter from an attorney Tessa had never met, informing him of the legal definition of harassment in the state of Michigan, the parameters of a restraining order, and the fact that his recent conduct had been documented. She did not know what else Mr. Caruso's resources had found, but whatever it was, Dale did not appear outside the building again. He did not call. The particular silence that followed felt different from the previous one, more complete, less like a held breath. The evening the letter was confirmed delivered, Mr. Caruso knocked on the doorframe of her office. She looked up. "Done," he said. Tessa set down her pen. "Thank you." He stayed in the doorway for a moment. "My daughter is coming to visit next week," he said. "Her name is Petra. She's 26, and she is going to have opinions about the state of the pantry and probably the guest room, and I would appreciate your help navigating that." Tessa smiled. She hadn't smiled in his presence before, not a real one, and she saw him notice it. See his expression shift slightly, register something. "I can do that," she said. Petra Caruso arrived on a Thursday with 2 large suitcases, strong opinions about oat milk, and the specific energy of a person who loved her father and worried about him, and expressed both through motion. She was sharp and warm in equal measure, and she looked at Tessa the first morning over the kitchen counter with frank assessment. "You're the one who actually runs things," she said. "I manage the schedule," Tessa said. "That's what I said." Petra poured herself coffee. "He seems better." He seemed, she hesitated. "After my mom died, and then the last assistant left, she was the one he actually liked. She had to go back to her family in Portland. He seemed like someone going through the right motions. You know, like a clock that keeps time but doesn't." She shook her head. "Sorry, I'm oversharing." "You're not," Tessa said. Petra looked at her. "He told me about the situation with your ex." "The letter." Tessa set down her mug. "He didn't tell me details," Petra said quickly, "just that there had been a problem and that he had helped handle it. He seemed." She stopped again, and this time the expression on her face was something more careful. "He seemed like himself again when he talked about it, like someone who had done something that mattered." Tessa thought about Dolores's tea, appearing without being requested, about a shared calendar and 11-minute Sunday calls and the photographs that had stayed on the wall for 4 years. "Your father," she said, "is a complicated man. The best ones usually are," Petra said, and smiled. The week Petra was there, the house felt different, fuller. There was noise at dinner, an argument about films, and a Sunday morning when all 3 of them ended up in the kitchen at the same time. Petra making eggs, Mr. Caruso trying to find something he'd misplaced, Tessa updating the calendar for the week ahead, and the scene had an accidental domesticity that no one commented on and all of them noticed. The night before Petra left, Tessa came downstairs late for a glass of water and found Mr. Caruso in the study, not working, just sitting in the chair by the window with a glass of whiskey and the quiet of someone who is not lonely exactly but is aware of the space around them. He looked up when she appeared. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't know you were still up. Don't apologize." He gestured vaguely at the room. "Sit, if you want." She didn't sit often in rooms she was technically employed to manage, but she sat. They were quiet for a moment. The house settled around them, the small sounds of winter outside. "When Petra was born, Mr. Caruso said, Lorraine and I had been married 2 years. We weren't ready. We thought we were, because we were 30 and reasonably functional adults, but we weren't. The first 6 months were the hardest thing I'd ever done." He paused. "But also the first time I understood what it meant to be responsible for something that mattered more than anything I'd built." Tessa looked at him. He was looking at the window. "My mother had a stroke in September," she said. She didn't plan to say it. It came out of the same quiet that his words had come out of. "She's in rehab. She's going to be okay." But there were 3 weeks when I didn't know if she was going to be okay, and I still went to work every day because Cody needed rent paid and my mother needed care paid, and fear doesn't actually stop things from needing to be done. "Mr." Caruso turned from the window and looked at her. "Your brother," he said. "He's applying to colleges." She had mentioned it once in passing weeks ago. The fact that he had retained it, filed it, found it worth keeping. She felt the crack in the wall widen. "January deadlines," she said. "If he needs letters of recommendation," Mr. Caruso said, "from someone in business, I'm willing, if it would help." Tessa looked at him across the quiet room, this precise and private man who used his resources in ways his late wife would have approved of, who came to his mother's grave in the rain, who had lost something enormous and was still quietly trying to be good. "That would help very much," she said. Spring came gradually, the way Detroit springs do, uncertain and then suddenly committed. The house changed with it, Dolores opening windows, the garden beginning its negotiations with the cold. Tessa's mother came home in March to the apartment with a cane and a walker and a stubbornness that the stroke had left entirely intact. Cody got into the University of Michigan's engineering program. He cried in the kitchen, which he would deny to everyone except Tessa, who saw it and said nothing. She had stopped counting the months. She went to work each morning. She managed the calendar, the correspondence, the small catastrophes and the large ones. She argued with Mr. Caruso twice in a way that was actually disagreement rather than adjustment, and both times he listened, reconsidered, and sometimes changed course. She learned that this was rare. She learned that he did not give that to many people. On a Friday in April, he asked her to stay late. Not because of a work problem. She could tell immediately it wasn't that. He was standing in the kitchen when she found him, which was unusual. He didn't usually linger in rooms. "I want to tell you something," he said, "and I want to do it correctly." Tessa waited. "I have been thinking carefully about what this is," he said, "and what it could be, and I am aware that the position I'm in, the difference in, the context of employment." He stopped, pressed his mouth together, started again. "I am not a man who speaks without thinking, but I find that I want to say something to you and I haven't been able to think it into the right shape." "Then say it wrong," Tessa said. He looked at her. "I don't want you to work for me," he said. He paused. "I want you to stay. Not as an employee, as someone who matters to me, as someone I'd like to spend more time with, if you're willing, on terms that are entirely your own to set." The kitchen was quiet around them. Evening light through the windows over the garden. Tessa thought about the unemployment office, the plastic chair, the folded bills. She thought about walking past this house the first time and thinking it was cold, and discovering instead that it was a place where someone had tried to keep something warm after the warmth went out of it. "You should know," she said, "that I come with a mother who has strong opinions about soup and a brother who will absolutely ask you too many questions. And I am not a woman who does things partway or changes her mind once she's decided." Mr. Caruso looked at her with the expression she had watched develop over months, the one that had started as assessment and had become something else entirely, something open and unhurried. "Those all sound like features," he said, "not problems." Tessa laughed, and the sound in this kitchen on this April evening was nothing like the careful, managed version she had deployed in professional settings for months. It was real. It surprised her. "Then yes," she said, "I'm willing." He smiled, and for the first time she saw what he must have looked like before loss made him careful. She saw the full weight of it. The man Lorraine had married, the father Petra had grown up with. The person who still existed beneath the precision and the quiet and the 11-minute Sunday phone calls. She saw him. 6 months later, the city was golden with October, and Tessa's mother had declared the kitchen in the Grosse Pointe house superior to any kitchen she had previously encountered, a pronouncement she made to Franklin Caruso directly while he stood there, and received it with more grace than most people would have managed. Cody had started his freshman year and called every Sunday, which was not 11 minutes, but which sometimes ran long in ways that nobody complained about. The photographs in the hallway were still there. They would stay there. Tessa had understood from the beginning that Lorraine was not a chapter to be closed, but a part of the house that remained. The dog, the summer somewhere, the laugh frozen in light. And she had never once wanted it any other way. On a Saturday morning in October, she stood at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching the garden do its slow autumn work. She heard Franklin come downstairs, heard the particular sound of his footsteps that she now knew the way she knew her brother's voice. He came to stand beside her at the window. He didn't say anything. He put his hand over hers on the counter. Outside, a bird crossed the sky over the bare trees, small and quick and completely itself. Tessa felt the weight of everything she had carried, the bills, the fear, the years of managing, of holding things together with both butts, of surviving the specific loneliness of being the person who keeps everyone else from falling. Lift not completely, not forever, but enough to breathe differently. She turned her hand over and held his.